I was holding my father's urn when she said it. You know, you're not real family. You're just a reminder of the mistake he made. I didn't drop the urn. I wish I had. Maybe that would have made her flinch. Maybe it would have snapped me out of the haze I'd been trapped in for years. But instead, I just stood there, paralyzed. My fingers curled tight around what was left of him, my lungs locked like even breathing would somehow betray me more. Her voice didn't crack. Mine did. And that was the first betrayal. Not her words, but that I didn't fight back. That I let them sit there in the silence, like they belonged more than I did. My name is Lena. I'm 26. And I had just buried the only person who ever made me feel like I was part of something real, until he married her. Before Diane entered our lives, it was just Dad and me. Two people in a small house that felt like a kingdom. My kingdom. He raised me solo after my mom left when I was 5. Just walked out the door one day with a suitcase and a note that said, I wasn't made for this. But he was. He was made. For fatherhood. For late-night takeout and taped-together science projects. For clapping the loudest at my 5th-grade talent show even though my voice cracked on every note. He was the kind of dad who drove 2 hours to get a cake with real strawberries on top because I said the store-bought ones tasted like fridge. He didn't just raise me, he chose me. Every single day. But then, she arrived. Diane. She was polished, expensive. The kind of woman who looked like she belonged in a catalog and spoke in permanent disapproval. I remember the first dinner with her. Napkins folded into triangles, salad forks on the left, and me in a wrinkled hoodie, feeling like I'd just stepped into someone else's house. But I tried. God, I tried. I smiled. I complimented her hair. I even called her mom once, on a stupid dare to myself. She looked at me like I'd insulted her, like I was a stray dog licking her shoes. After that, the erasure started slowly, quietly. Photos came down from the hallway, no explanation. My bedroom was moved to the attic. To give the twins more space, she said. The twins, her kids from a previous marriage, got the bigger rooms, the warm spaces, the framed prints that used to hang in the living room. I got pink insulation and a draft that never went away. Family dinners were rescheduled without me. Vacations. Planned while I stayed behind to watch the house. And Dad, he saw it. Sometimes, in flickers, he'd leave little notes. I'm sorry, I love you. Folded into my laundry, tucked into books, scribbled on receipts. But Diane always got to him first. Always knew what to say to rewrite the story. She's manipulating you, she whispered once, loud enough for me to hear from the next room. And somehow, he listened. He stopped asking me how I was, stopped noticing when I skipped meals or cried myself to sleep. He started looking at me like I was a problem to solve, not a daughter to hold. Still, I stayed. I thought love meant waiting, that he'd see her for what she was. That blood would mean something. But then, he got sick. It started as fatigue, then tests, then more tests, then the hospital. And Diane? She made every decision, chose every doctor, scheduled every visit, and never told me when they were. She'd text vague updates. He's resting, no need to come by today. And I believed her. I thought he just needed time, that he'd come home and we'd reset everything. I even cleaned the attic the day before he died, like he was going to walk in and tell me he was proud of how I kept it together. I didn't get to say goodbye. She said, he didn't want visitors in the end, but I never heard that from him. So there I was, standing in the living room, his urn in my arms, my heart hanging by a thread. And Diane looked me straight in the eye and said it again. You were never really in his plans. No will, no letter, no funeral speech, just a cold stare and a locked door behind her. The study. The one room I wasn't allowed in. Not even when he was alive. The moment he passed, she locked it, and then she told me I was a mistake. I didn't cry in front of her. I carried his ashes up to the attic, my attic, and sat on the floor until my legs went numb. Stared at the spot where my ceiling leaked in the spring. Listened to the muffled laughter of her kids downstairs, already talking about redecorating. And I asked myself something terrifying. What if she's right? What if I really was just a ghost in his house? What if he left me nothing because there was nothing worth leaving? But then, something kept scratching at the back of my mind, like a splinter I couldn't reach. The study. She locked it immediately. Changed the knob. Stopped anyone from going in. Why? What's in there? What could possibly be so dangerous that I couldn't see it? And what did she mean by, "You were never really in his plans"? Because my father wasn't a careless man. He was a man who drove 2 hours for strawberry cake, and I wasn't done fighting for the proof that he loved me. Even if it was buried behind a locked door, even if she had erased me from the walls, she hadn't erased me from him. And somewhere in this house, I was going to prove that. The first week, I stayed quiet. Not out of grace, out of shock. I walked through the house like a guest no one remembered inviting, touching nothing, saying nothing. Diane told people I was coping in my own way, like silence was a choice I made for peace. Not because I didn't know who I was without him, but the truth? I wasn't coping. I was disappearing. I stopped opening the curtains in the attic. I ate only when I was sure no one was in the kitchen. I flushed the toilet with the door still open, just so I wouldn't feel like I was hiding from my own life. But I was. The day after the funeral, her children moved in, just like that. The twins, Brent and Chloe, carried in boxes like they'd been planning this all along. They didn't even look at me, just opened my bedroom door, measured it with their eyes, and said, "This'll work, Basai." That evening, my posters were in a trash bag, my bedding was crumpled in the hall, and my door was no longer mine. I asked Diane if they could maybe wait. She smiled almost pitifully. "It's a new chapter. Let go of the old." She gave them Dad's car, his watch, even the leather journal he used to write in every night, the one I begged to read growing up, the one he always said was, "For later." There was no later. When I asked about it, she barely blinked. "It's just a notebook, Lena." No, it wasn't. It was his voice. And now it was in the hands of someone who never heard it laugh. I tried reaching out to anyone who had once called themselves family. My godmother responded first. "Honey, I'm sure there's a reason. Maybe ask nicely. Ask nicely. Ask nicely for proof that I existed. For scraps of love in a house built by my memories." Her friends started whispering. "She's lucky Diane took her in at all. She's not even legally adopted, is she?" And the worst one came from my own cousin. Maybe he didn't leave her anything. Because there was nothing to leave. It hit like a punch wrapped in a whisper. And suddenly, everything that felt solid cracked. The family lawyer stopped responding to my calls. When I finally cornered him outside his office, he looked uncomfortable, like I was a stray dog he couldn't feed. "Diane says there's no documentation, Lena. No official designation, no will. I'm sorry." That night, I sat on the attic floor and tried to write him a letter. My dad. But the words wouldn't come. Everything felt too loud and too quiet at once. I couldn't decide if I wanted to scream or disappear entirely, so I went to the one place Diane hadn't touched yet. The garage. It was around 2 in the morning, and the air smelled like rust and motor oil, familiar, sharp, unbothered by grief. I curled up behind the old lawn chairs just to breathe in a place where he used to hum while changing tires. And that's when I saw it. A small red toolbox, coated in dust, half buried beneath camping gear we hadn't used in years. I pulled it down. My hands were shaking like they already knew it mattered. Inside, beneath rusted screws and broken pencils, was a folded slip of paper, a floor plan. Of the house, encircled in thick black ink, was the study. Next to it, in his handwriting, were 2 words, Lena's key. I stared at it like it might disappear if I blinked. My heart kicked into my ribs. For the first time in weeks, I felt something stronger than numb. Hope. Not the loud, cinematic kind. The kind that tiptoes in, whispering, maybe you were never invisible. Maybe he did leave you something. I ran back inside like the floor was fire, up the stairs, past the hallway that no longer had my baby photos, straight to the study door. I twisted the knob, locked. The key, the one he used to wear around his neck like a habit, was gone. My hand hovered above the doorknob as if sheer desperation might melt the metal. But it didn't. He was gone, and whatever he left for me was now behind a lock I couldn't open. That was the night I collapsed on the hallway floor and cried so hard, my ribs ached. Not for him, for the possibility that he'd tried to love me in the end, and I would never know, because she would make sure I never knew. I cried until the hallway light went out, until the hope turned cold again, because what's more devastating than not being chosen is being chosen too late. And I told myself something I still regret. Maybe this is what I get for expecting love to leave a paper trail. But somewhere beneath that, another voice whispered, quieter, but stronger. What if he knew? What if he saw her coming? What if that sketch wasn't the end? What if it was the beginning? The shift didn't arrive like thunder. It arrived like a whisper. I was visiting his grave again. I didn't even bring flowers that time. I just needed somewhere that didn't lie to me. Somewhere the silence didn't feel manipulative. That's when I saw it. A single red rose, resting against the base of the headstone. Fresh, quiet, intentional, tucked. Beneath it, a folded piece of paper. No envelope, just one line, scribbled in handwriting I hadn't seen in 6 years. I miss our talks. I hope she finds what you left. It wasn't signed, but I knew. Uncle Ray. Dad's college best friend. The one who used to bring me science kits and teach me how to play chess with sugar cubes. He vanished from our lives not long after Diane arrived, labeled a bad influence, though no one ever explained what that meant. Just like that, he disappeared. Like so many others once Diane took over. I stared at the note until the wind almost carried it away. Then I pulled out my phone and texted the only number I still had for him. No message. Just a photo of the rose and the note. He called 5 minutes later. Lena. His voice cracked on my name. I was wondering how long it would take you to find the sketch. I couldn't speak at first, just held the phone like it might melt. He told me everything about how Dad had been planning something for me. A surprise, a protection, a confession. But he was afraid. Afraid that if Diane ever found out, she'd destroy it. She never wanted you there, Lena. He knew it. And he hated himself for letting her get between you. Then he said something. I haven't forgotten. There's more. He didn't put it all in one place. He knew she'd go looking. Breadcrumbs. I hung up with my heart pounding and my breath shallow. I went home with new eyes. I stopped grieving and started listening. Diane walked around like royalty. The twins flaunted my father's watch like it had always belonged to them. And no one, not one of them, noticed I had stopped asking questions. They thought I'd given up. But I had just stopped talking. The attic was where I began. Old photo albums, dusty boxes, moldy blankets I couldn't bring myself to throw out. It was all clutter, noise. But then I saw it, an album with a red string tied around the spine. Not one of hers, ours. Inside, taped to the corner of a hiking photo, was a dried violet, pressed, delicate, almost crumbling. Dad and I used to collect those. Every spring, every trail. I gently peeled it from the paper, and inside its fold was a USB drive. I stared at it like it might disappear. I ran to my laptop, nearly knocking it off the desk. The files loaded slowly. One was just an image, a scanned letter, addressed to me, Mylena. My heart folded in on itself. If you're reading this, I didn't do enough. I let silence win. I let her convince me that distance was protection when it was just cowardice. I couldn't breathe. But I never stopped being proud of you. I never stopped being your dad. And I didn't leave this world without trying to make something right. He said he had hidden something for me. Something real, a safe, built into the study wall, behind the bookshelf. But only I would know the code. My mind went blank. And then, it hit me. The pennies. He used to leave them for me as clues when I was little, one on each step, leading me to surprise gifts or messages, a secret game that belonged only to us. I ran down the staircase, past the family portraits that now featured only Diane's side, 7 pennies, laid out on the staircase outside the study, one on each step, like he was still leading me somewhere. I stared at the wall next to the door, the one with the framed photo of him at his first marathon. It was slightly crooked. I reached behind it, and there it was, a keypad, hidden in the drywall. I stared at it, unsure. Then I remembered. The date of our first hike. It was the first time I ever told him I felt like we were our own little family. I typed it in. 4 digits. The keypad beeped, the wall clicked. I reached in and pulled out a sealed manila envelope, a flash drive, and something that made my knees buckle, a copy of his will, but not the one Diane had waved like a sword. This was an amendment, signed, notarized, dated just weeks before he died. Everything he owned was left to me, the house. The accounts, the study, the journals, even the garage. It was never hers. It was mine. He had tried. He had chosen me, not with noise, not with permission, with quiet protection, with a code only I could break. And as I sat on the floor of the study, holding the proof in my hands, I didn't cry. I just breathed. Because the part of me that had been waiting to feel seen finally did, and the real battle was about to begin. I didn't storm in. I didn't scream. I didn't even knock on her door. Because the kind of power I had now didn't need to announce itself. It moved quietly. I made copies. Every page, every clause, every notarized signature. The amendment, the flash drive, the letter. Then I walked into the same law office she thought she controlled, the same one she'd weaponized against me, and I handed them my father's final word. They looked stunned. One of the senior partners flipped through the documents with shaking hands. "Do you know what this means?" he asked. I didn't answer. Because I did. Dad had included a private clause, a legal override, one he'd quietly paid for in case anything went wrong, in case he couldn't fight back himself. It stated that if a newer version of his will was ever discovered, signed and notarized without dispute, it would replace all prior versions immediately. And that's exactly what this was. It was clean, final, ironclad. I was the rightful heir, not Diane, not her kids. Me. The house, the car she drove, the stocks she was bragging about at brunch, the trust fund she hadn't even told me existed. Every single thing she built her illusion on belonged to me. but I didn't. Rush. Because rushing would have been emotional. And this wasn't emotional anymore. It was strategy. I started small. The water bill? Transferred into my name. The electricity? Same. Property insurance? Canceled, then reissued under me, using Dad's amendment. I made no announcements, no warnings, just quiet shifts. But the banks? That's when she started to panic. I filed an internal claim for ownership confusion, attaching my legal documents. The accounts froze within 24 hours. Diane couldn't pay the gardener or her precious wine subscription. And still, I said nothing. The twins started to notice first. "Mom, why doesn't the Wi-Fi work? I thought you said we had money in the account." She brushed them off. I could hear her from upstairs, still pretending everything was fine. Still pretending. She held the pen until I called a family gathering, just like she had after Dad passed, when she made sure I sat in the corner while she handed out heirlooms like party favors. Only this time, I sent the invitations. Her children came in designer clothes, laughing like they'd already won. Diane walked in last, heels sharp, confidence, louder than truth. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't stand. I sat at the head of the table, the one she once told me I didn't belong at, and I read my father's letter, aloud, word for word. I watched as their faces shifted, mockery turning to confusion, confusion curling into dread. Then I played the video, the one hidden on the flash drive. My father's voice filled the room. "If you're watching this, then she tried to erase you, but I made sure she couldn't. Lena, this is yours. All of it." The silence afterward was a kind of music I hadn't heard in years. Then I slid the envelope across the table. Diane didn't even open it. She didn't need to. It was a formal eviction notice. 30 days. Her face drained of color. The twins stared at me like I'd just flipped their world upside down. Because I had. She tried to gather herself. Her voice was low but trembling. "You think this changes anything?" My lawyer, seated beside me, looked up with the calm of someone who already won. "Everything's legal. Everything's signed." She opened her mouth, and then shut it. She didn't argue, didn't scream, didn't throw anything. She just stood up and left. For the first time, she was the one who didn't belong. And I sat there in the center of what used to be her kingdom, not needing to lift a single finger. But as her footsteps faded, I felt something pressing against my chest. Not gloating, not triumph, not even peace. Just a question. Was that enough? Was silence really stronger than a final word? Because she had taken so much from me. Years, memories, moments with my father I would never get back, and now she was walking away, without hearing the one thing I had never said out loud, that she didn't win, that she never did. And part of me, deep down, knew I wasn't finished. Not yet. A week after she left, she emailed me. Subject line, closure. I didn't open it at first, just stared at it sitting there in my inbox like a wound that hadn't decided if it was going to scar. But curiosity isn't something you outgrow. It lingers. So I opened it. Only one paragraph. "I made mistakes. I raised those boys alone. Did what I thought I had to. I didn't mean to hurt you. I hope you can forgive me." No apology, just explanation, as if that could undo what she'd done. As if erasing me could be excused with loneliness. I didn't respond. Not because I didn't have anything to say, but because forgiveness isn't something you give to people who never saw you as human in the first place. Forgiveness, real forgiveness, requires recognition, and she never once looked at me and saw me. Only what I represented. A mistake, a threat, a presence she couldn't control. So I wrote her a letter instead. Not to send, just to say it. I was always his family. Even when you convinced him to forget. Even when you moved me to the attic. Even when you handed my childhood to your children like it was a donation box. Blood doesn't make you family. Love does. And you never gave it. I folded the letter and placed it in the fire pit Dad and I used to roast marshmallows in. Watched the edges curl. Watched it turn into something quiet. That night, I made a choice. The house? It never really felt like mine. Not even after I won it back. It felt haunted, not by ghosts but by silences too loud to ignore. Walls that remembered things I didn't want to remember. Footsteps that sounded too much like surrender. So I gave it away. To a local shelter that helps girls aging out of the foster system. Girls like me, not literally, but emotionally. Girls who were told they were too much or not enough. Girls who were silenced, rearranged, ignored. Girls who needed 4 walls that said, "You belong here." I didn't make a speech. I didn't ask for a plaque. I just signed the deed and walked away. I moved into a small apartment across town. Nothing fancy, just mine. A window that let in afternoon light. A kitchen that still smelled like paint. A mattress on the floor for the first few weeks, and honestly, I didn't mind. There was something sacred about building from nothing. On the wall, I hung the photo Dad and I took during our first hike together. He was holding my hand. I was wearing a blue jacket 2 sizes too big. We were both laughing like we didn't know how the world worked yet. Beneath it, I placed a single penny. The same way he used to leave them for me, one at a time, in quiet places, leading me to something better. And I guess that's what this is, a trail I built myself. I started a youth program with the rest of the inheritance, something simple, steady. A space for the invisible ones, the overlooked, the daughters of no one and the sisters of nobody. Every Friday, we write letters we'll never send. Every Tuesday, we plant something in the community garden. And every time one of the girls says, "I don't have real family," I smile. Because I know. Family is something you build, not something you're handed. It's not in bloodlines. It's in lifelines. The people who show up when you're drowning, not just when the sun's out. Don't think about Diane much anymore. She never wrote again. She didn't show up in court. She didn't try to fight. Maybe because deep down she knew what I finally did. That power doesn't come from screaming louder. It comes from standing so still, they can't shake you. I used to think I needed someone to validate my place in this world. But now, I know I was always the one holding the key. She told me I wasn't real family, and for a while, I believed her. I let her voice become mine. Let her lies become my limits. Let her absence feel like truth, but not anymore. Because he left more than ashes and silence. He left a trail, a code, a voice I finally learned to hear beneath all the noise. And in the end, she said I wasn't real family, but he left everything to prove I always was.